Sallyann, welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Thank you so much for having me, Ken.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So nice to meet you. I've heard you on several podcasts before, but our audience maybe hasn't. So can you give us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now?
So it is a absolute zag, not a
Yeah,
straight line.
cool.
I should say, I even though today I am the CEO of a tech company, if you had asked me that question 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you and said, "What are you talking about?" Right? And I say this to all of your viewers out there because so many are curious about tech. I would have never thought I would be building. I just launched MentorGPT, which is, AI on our platform. I launched NFTs on blockchain last year, have an app, all of these things, and what got me here, I wish I can say to you, I have a tech background. I wish I can
Right.
say to you, I have none of those things. I come from traditional, old school, went to law school. I am very nerdy. I have 5 degrees, always curious about all different kinds of things. I have a foundation, but always the common thread for me in everything I have done was looking at people and our human skills around people and how we show up and how we get signal, and how be included. So all of these things that have led me here, there is that common thread, and I guess there are different channels now. Now I use all kinds of fancy tech to be
Sure.
able to do that same thing that I've been doing throughout my life.
Where did that start? I mean, was that thinking back in, high school and were you always kind of geared that way? Like curious about people and how they function and operate?
Um, Interestingly, when I tell people I have 5 degrees, and I have all the ornaments, it's exactly the opposite of what it is I do and I build, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm looking at human skills. I'm not looking at those traditional ornaments. And I think in many ways, I accumulated all of those degrees to fit in.
Hmm.
Uh, and they're not actually a reflection of all my true gifts and talents and strengths. But those were the things that made me get approved by my family and by others, the traditional ornaments. I think in many ways I was a black sheep thinker, black sheep in every aspect of my life. And I kind of used the traditional things that make you become accepted and excelled really well at it. But the thing that makes me uniquely me, which is what Glee is about, my exceptional kind of creative skills with these like mad critical thinking and communication skills. And I have a little bit of entrepreneurial spoonfuls of entrepreneurial, badassery in there and,
Sure.
all of those things. And I think many times, many of us don't have the opportunity to signal those things. So I think when we build product, you find founders who build product to solve things within themselves. They're
Hmm.
very, very aligned and tied to what it is they're building and growing.
What happened? So you're getting the ornaments, you're finding significance in the same way someone might with, making a lot of money, right? Or
Yes.
whatever kind of makes us think that's going to be the thing that's going to make me happy and fulfilled and make everyone think I'm awesome. And when did you get to a point where you said, I don't know, was it like the fifth degree and you were like, I'm still not maybe aligned with what I want to do? Or like, when was that for you? And was it a gradual buildup or was it kind of one event?
It was you know what? Even though I became a lawyer at 21, I had 5 degrees.
Whoa.
Like I want you to think
Whoa.
of that. And I'm a hard worker, so I excelled
Apparently.
very quickly. I'm very nerdy. You can tell by the size of the glasses, right? And I just remember, and it's so interesting that you say what other people's version of what success looks like. So at a
Hmm.
very young age, I became very successful. And I just remember that, I had I was in, mergers and acquisitions and, a very high network client in the US sent their private plane to pick me up and fly me from Florida to Aspen for lunch just to talk about transactions. And I remember sitting on, a very fancy Gulf Stream by myself and thinking, this cannot be it. And I felt such guilt and lack of gratitude because I'm thinking, this is like important. I'm only
Hmm.
25 years old
Hmm.
and all of these things are happening. And it's like putting on clothing that does not fit you. You look at it in, a screen and you're like, oh my God, that looks awesome. And then you put it on your body and it does not. So there was great discomfort in the role, but I didn't know. I didn't have the vocabulary, or I didn't know how to raise my hand and say, this is not my life, because it looked successful. And because
Right.
I genuinely worked hard, I excelled, but every day felt like darts in my forehead. And it was when my dad passed away. I was 29 at the time, and he left me, from the Caribbean, my family, a tiny inheritance. And I looked back and I just kind of stopped. And I stopped for about a year. And, many people don't have the privilege of stopping, but I literally just stopped because I had climbed up the wrong mountain. And I enrolled myself, Ken, into architect school, like exactly the opposite of everything. And everybody was like, what are you doing? Why are you in art? And I just needed to be around people who did
Creative, right?
not have, yeah, didn't have those expectations of
Hmm.
that version of myself I was trying to take apart or figure out. And I just remember that year of being in architect school somehow kind of whispered to me my courage, going, look back, what have you been doing that brings you joy? And it has always been around teaching, mentoring, human skills. I was always volunteering. I was volunteer of the year 7 years in a row in the US from 21.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes the things that we think are our hobbies and our side hustles are the reasons why we're here.
Right. Right. That's amazing. Was the relationship with your dad, not that I didn't know we were gonna go here, but I hope it's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Was there also a bit of, because I think sometimes when you're 21 years old and you have 5 degrees, and I think you mentioned earlier there were certain things that I think were kind of expected from you. So I'm kind of
Yeah,
gathering that there might have been some family pressures. Was the passing
yeah.
of your father also a bit of a, I don't want to say permission, but was there a ability then to be a little more free? I don't know what the
Maybe
relationship was there, but
subconsciously,
yeah,
maybe I can certainly tell you looking back, I know I accumulated all of the degrees and all the ornaments to just be accepted, right? Just because I was so off, everybody was kind of one shade and I was like a little bit of an off shade,
sure,
right? I
yeah,
would say the things nobody wanted to say, or
hmm,
do the things nobody wanted to do. I come from,
right,
a very traditional Asian family, very hardworking, so the fact that you had this, radical daughter, it just wasn't, not that it wasn't accepted, but it was just like a little slightly zagged, right?
sure, absolutely, absolutely. So you go to architect school. What happens then? You're 29. You said you when you went there.
Yeah, 29, stopped, went to architecture school. And at that time, also, I created a foundation with my inheritance. So I just gave
Cool.
my entire and created this foundation and started doing what I was doing in the US, volunteering. It was for Kids in the Power of Work. And I created it for the Caribbean, where my family is from. They're from an island in Trinidad and Tobago. So I
Awesome.
created, it's called the Growing Leaders Foundation, and I started just designing what it is I was doing, of giving young people soft skills, human skills, workplace skills, the things that they don't teach you in school, and our incarcerated youth and, at-risk families, and started, doing that across the Caribbean, financial literacy, all the things that gets us ahead in life that
Hmm.
nobody bothers to take the time to teach you. And that's when I realized I actually have a strength in curriculum design. I have a strength in knowing all kinds of interesting stuff and distilling it and being able to put it back out there in really unique ways. That's when I discovered I was creative. Those programs eventually, the government of the UAE heard about what I was doing, and that's how I first came out to the Middle East and Dubai to design the STEAM curriculums out here in the region, and led me to become the head of people for the first unicorn in the region, Careem. So sometimes you don't know where this path would lead you, and Careem got me close to data scientists, and we were the first unicorn in tech, which whispered my courage to go, oh, I can build tech also. And here I am 5 years later.
And you were head of people at Careem, right? And it was purchased by Uber, correct?
That's correct, for 3.1 billion.
Nice. Were you part of the exit?
I was there in 2016. The exit happened right before COVID, but
Okay.
everybody, of course, called me and they said, "How many shares did you still hold on to?" Right? So,
Yeah, yeah. We
so
won't make you disclose it here, but
yeah.
that's
But
awesome.
what I can say to you is this: it was an experience with, I had two McKinsey founders, incredible founders who I was the only female at, C-suite level with them. They brought me in at their level. So I knew what it was to be included. I had zero background I don't have any certificate in, anything for people. And here it was, they were following my work and they included me at the
Mhm.
table because they spotted, the things that made me uniquely me.
That's cool.
And that was, so the fact that I started experimenting on some of my first algorithms and the things I were working on, I experimented there with people. We had the brightest in the world coming from Stanford and everywhere else. And people were just, breaking. And it's not because you came from Stanford. It's just that the things that make us excel in work and in life, and most of us to rise, has nothing to do with the hard skills that we have. I mean, except in certain areas, right? Like a brain surgeon.
Sure.
But, a brain surgeon still needs a certain level of critical thinking, right? A certain level of human ingenuity and wisdom that we all have within us that somehow we never really talk about because we can't really measure it. And I was determined to find a way to measure that, which is what my patent is about, and to allow it to surface and signal.
How does it, I mean, without giving away the secret sauce, like what are you measuring specifically? And can you give us kind of
Yeah,
a high level overview
absolutely.
of how you measure it?
Absolutely. So, the only way you can measure human skills, if I were to look at, Ken's communication ability or your leadership ability, is actually to look at you in a stack of others handling a situation. So it's not a certificate of leadership or a
Mm-hmm.
certificate. I need to actually put you in a situation because it's situational
Mm-hmm.
human skills and see what you would do in that situation and then see how five other people would act in that situation. And immediately I will be able to pick up, wait a minute, there's something very unique there about what Ken is doing. And there's
Mm-hmm.
something very unique. So the entire system of Glee, it's a quantitative, qualitative, it's very nerdy, these words, and 360. But what that means is that we look at how you handle a situation applying these skills in the context of five other people. And we have this pool of like 500 of the world's leading experts that is constantly feeding the pool. So we know what really good looks like in America, and we know what really good looks like in India, right? Different countries, different contexts, or wherever it is in the world. And we are able to signal in a dynamic way going, you know what, this is how Ken's decision making is looking. And here's another thing about Ken. We can actually tell because it's dynamic, his learning agility, he's a quick learner. He's learning in 30 days versus 8 months. So we want to bet on Ken.
Right. That's a smart bet. I'm just kidding. But um, so so as you go through this, what's I'm thinking, especially in what I do, because our main business is talent acquisition for leadership, right? That's what we do, and I'm guessing the best applications for what you do would be in
Performance.
leadership roles, yeah, in leadership
Yeah.
performance, because I mean, not that it wouldn't be applicable to individual contributors, but because I'm sure you do a lot of that too. But at the leadership level, it's so much more critical because of the multiplication impact, right? Like they're going to run a team, they're going to, and so I'm guessing, do larger companies or large and small come to you and, for example, as part of their hiring process or part of their succession planning, kind of say, look, we kind of need to know where this slate of executives or where this new hire might be? Is that a common use of what you guys do?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, our first client in the US was Prada USA.
Okay.
And just to give you an example, and Prada USA, companies come with us with a very specific KPI. So, that particular company came to us in 2019. They were we had just brought out our first version of the product, very, very forward thinking. And they came to us saying, we want to increase the average price per sale on, transactions. We want to increase returning customers. And the third for them was a soft skills scorecard in terms of their managers, right? Something they were looking at in reference to their managers and in terms of giving feedback. And what we do is we do a scan right away of the organization of what are the human skills in the top tail and the bottom tail. And an organization normally has about 10 or 20% top tail, 10 or 20% bottom tail. Everybody else falls in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Once we know, if I were to ask any organization, what are the human skills and in what quantities and what combinations is driving your top and bottom performers, most companies don't know how to answer that question. They just don't know how to answer that question, right? Most people don't know. They don't know how to measure that. They don't know, if I were to say, what is the average learning agility of your top performers or your middle performers or your bottom performers, nobody really knows how to answer. And those things are crucial.
My
So
brain, not to interrupt, but my brain went somewhere with this. And I
yeah,
just want to see if it's on the right track, because I don't know if it
sure.
is, because I think it's more, I'm thinking in more of a KPI way, I think, than a
Yeah.
skill set way. But to me, I'm thinking, top 10 or 15%, they have a consistency of performance. But already, is that like wrong track? Is it more like you're looking for a personality trait? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
So,
it's not, as human beings, there is certain combinations of things about us, both our hard skills, our human skills, we call it. And now there's a whole new layer, which we can talk about, called AI skills, our AI enabled skills, that makes us top performers. So,
mm-hmm.
if I go back to that case of Prada, they're a very process driven company. In that particular company, and it's public, we have a case study on it. Their top performing salespeople had three traits in common. If you want to look at the personality, human behavior side, that is not typical of salespeople. Which we normally think of salespeople as being extroverted, thinking on their feet, persuasive in terms of their conversation. They were not any of those things. In a process-driven company, for them, it was conflict resolution, stress management, and rule following. Those were the
Interesting.
people that were performing the best. And the people that were not performing well were the ones that were
Looked like sales reps,
entrepreneurial.
probably, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, because
they were entrepreneurial in
yeah,
nature. And here's the cool thing, Ken.
yeah,
We had that company during COVID. So COVID happened and that whole company shut down. And we had almost like a time lab. We had a lab. We were the only company that was running with their teams as they were home.
right.
And what we were able to, because we knew who were the really agile learners, because we had such insights, we knew immediately who were the bottoms, the ones who we could bring right up to the top. Because
Mm-hmm.
in the COVID environment, entrepreneurial in nature, time management, all of those things now became critical for survival of the brand, right? In
Right.
terms of sales. And 2020, we increased their revenues by 34%.
Wow.
We were the only company that was running during that COVID period.
Wow.
That's very rare as a company, as a learning company, because a lot of times, people go, can you attribute a certain, rise in revenue to yourself? That was one of those rare instances as a learning company and as a behavior company that we can actually look at a company and go, we can attribute that those increase happened to what we were doing in that particular
Thank
organization.
you for giving that example, because that I completely get it now. And what's really interesting about Prada, and you could tell me, now that it's published, but my guess is if you're the hiring manager and someone walks into your store to interview and they're bubbly and they're outgoing and they've done this and they've won President's Club and they got the trip to Hawaii last year, you're like, that's my person. But in reality, based on how the culture was, they're going to struggle because they're going to be fighting City Hall all the time to play by the rules, and they got to, be on track. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. This is what most people miss in learning and development and behavior. What they do is they attribute skills to roles.
Hmm.
They don't ever take into consideration the culture as a
Mm-hmm.
whole of the organization, learning agility within the organization, and what's really driving, right? Because if you look really close, what you think is driving your top performers is not, this generic thing. It's an actual
Right.
formula. If you know
Right.
what that formula is, then you know what it is you need to develop others for if you want the formula to be the same, right?
That's so interesting. And it's kind of funny because I'm just thinking of our own company. And, again, we're leadership recruiting. And traditionally, recruiting companies, or when they hire recruiters, type A pure sales type people, but we're also very process oriented. We use a lot of automation. We have to have systems because we source a lot of people every month as a team, and we work across 4 different countries. And so, keeping up in our database and doing all these things that sales reps sometimes don't like to do, right? So we've got to find this rare combination of gregarious, but also a rule follower, right? So on a disc model, it might look like something like high I and high C at the same time, right?
Yeah.
If you're familiar with that test.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. And which is rare because of, I and C sometimes are like, well, what do you mean? Like, because sales reps
They're
just want to
opposing,
sell.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're opposing, but you once as then you can do it absolutely correct. Talking about, recruitment, there is a company called it used to be very famous in the US called Monster, the
Oh
job
yeah,
board.
of course. Yeah.
So in India, we during COVID, we also powered the entire Monster job board across the entire Asia Pacific region. And here's what's interesting about that. So in the Asian, India, Philippines, Singapore, this whole part of the world, the Middle East, what matters most is how many years you have been, right? There's, it's still very old school, right? I want
Sure.
someone with 10 years experience or 5 years experience. So, for them, the problem statement was a really simple one. How is it, can we have new hires who do not have experience? How can we have them surface during COVID? Because many of them, we kind of had like a red light, high alert on the app that, I'm in trouble, I need to find a job. How do we get them to actually surface? And as you know, if you don't show up in the first 5 pages of search, forget it. It doesn't
Right.
matter, right?
Right.
So for that particular company, we developed a tool where when you immediately signed up onto the app, we had just a 1 minute, one of our behavioral questions. And in India, it was big around communication, right? Communication is kind of critical, right? For any kind of
Sure.
frontline facing tool. So we developed a very narrow tool that asked them 10 questions around communication that immediately was able to signal on their profiles. And the deal we made with Monster in building that API is if they score above a 7, they will automatically show up in the top 5 pages of search, regardless of what the year criteria was. And just that alone, Ken, 87% of them were able to, for the first time, be able to get interviews.
Isn't that
and
crazy?
be able to get, just a simple bias in the system of how recruiters were searching, because the criteria, we looked at them, like we would sit and observe, and they would just, the first thing they would start with is the role and then years. And the way it's designed, the system is designed for the bias to take place.
Right.
Right. And here you have, whether you're young or old, who have all the skills and have all of the abilities, and you're just not seen at all because you can't surface based on the bias built into the tagging system.
Right. It's so wild. I tell people, and now it's more advanced with AI, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute, but we use LinkedIn a lot for finding people. And when I say a lot, I mean primarily we use LinkedIn, right?
Sure.
Sometimes Indeed a little bit here and there, and we used to use Monster, but really LinkedIn, because we're looking more for passive talent. Sure. And we'll use Boolean searches, which again, now AI can do a lot of that for you. They'll build a Boolean behind the scenes, but a Boolean, for anyone listening, is it's sort of like if you typed in Italian restaurant with no other criteria into Google, the first hits, if you had your location finder turned on, might be Italian restaurants in your area. If you had your location finder off, it's going to be Italian restaurants anywhere, right? If, as you go further into the search, if you get to page 2, it might be Italian shoes, right? It might be just restaurants that aren't Italian, right? It could be anything. If I put those 2 words into quotes, making them conditions upon each other, now it's going to make it more robust. But to your point, it's like if you can, for individuals trying to crack the code, like when they're looking for jobs and stuff, what we try to encourage them to do is look, first of all, don't be humble about your accomplishments on LinkedIn, especially because where you're limited on a resume to a page or two, these online formats can go on forever, right? You can have your media kit on there. You can have, I have 52 recommendations, I think, on my LinkedIn profile I saw yesterday. So I really abuse that privilege, but it allows people when they're looking for you, the more data there is on you, then the more likely you are to come up in search results, to your point, right? Now, you guys designed something specifically to say, let's get those that have been kind of outcasted from this system included back in. But I'm saying from a LinkedIn standpoint, people can proactively do that, right? To highlight their skills and resources to get tucked back in there.
Yeah, but here's the funny thing about LinkedIn, so I interestingly a couple of years ago had a chat with the LinkedIn product team
Yeah.
in Berlin. And what's interesting about LinkedIn is because they have not cracked the code also on human skills. So if you
Right.
recall, they tried with that endorse feature,
Yeah.
where you have
It's not
and
good.
everybody,
Yeah.
and everybody who had friends would just endorse. And I
Yeah.
remember getting on the call with the guy, and I said, "What the hell? It's like a popularity contest.
It
They don't even
is.
know if you have the skills or not." I said, "But if it was something that I can drop you in a situation, and then I can show how you stack up in terms of exactly how Glee does it, right? To be able to show how you stack up against others in terms of handling that situation. All of a sudden, I've provided context. I've provided some
Well, then
meat,
it's real. It's because
right?
it's real. It's based on
Absolutely.
something. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
of course, as I said, I'm like a tiny startup, the LinkedIn product guy. He's like, well, when you get bigger, we either acquire companies like you, or but your tech is just not up to par to our system right now. And I kind of
Sure.
chuckled, just saying, you wait and see.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hilarious. I know that the endorse feature, if anything, now I'm like, anytime someone endorses me now, I'm like, what are you trying to sell to me? Because that's who endorses
Like
you,
a
right?
joke. It's an
Yeah.
absolute joke.
It's the marketers will go through and so that I don't know endorsed me for leadership. I'm like, oh, cool. And then 5 minutes later, they're selling me life
Yeah.
insurance through the chat.
Another
So
thing that is, even on the hard skills on a LinkedIn or many of the job profiles, is you can take a tiny little quiz on it, saying, okay, I want you to go through, but we're not the same person if we don't practice those things in a period of 6 months or 12 months. So a lot of us, and if you notice, none of those things have expiry dates on it. So what happens is if you go into your profiles and it says, okay, showcase your skills and go through my little assessment. If the assessment is 2 years old or 3 years old, like, asking me to practice law when I did it in my 20s, I am
right.
going to be a god awful lawyer.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
Right. So that's another thing, is that, we are constantly learning and growing. And these types of metrics need to be dynamic, not static. We are not one thing in all situations in both our hard skills and both our human skills. And now we have this entirely new layer, which is called AI enabled skills, that really is, for most of us, if we don't start thinking about skills in this way, hard skills, human skills, AI enabled skills, and what is it? Because every job role now needs some version of AI enabled skills for
Can
people
you
to be right.
can you define that then for us? Like, what is AI enabled skills,
So
or what
let's
are they?
think about, well, AI enabled skills is a combination of, some of it might be hard and some of it might be human skills. And let me give you an example. So you are in automations, I know automations also really well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for us on LinkedIn, we use a product called Expandy
Mm-hmm.
for
I've heard of that.
reach outs, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't just, reach out one by one to individuals. And then, the type of content you do off of that in terms of your connections to get your conversion rates at 50 and 60%. We use versions of, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
Perplexity. All of those things require you knowing the tools, the hard skills, having the curiosity, and the ability to figure out and tinker around on the tools, also being able to have the creative thinking in terms of the content to be able to put that together, to go, wait a minute, something that I was taking 6 hours or 10 hours to do, I can automate in an hour,
Yeah.
and it's done for the week, right? So most of our jobs now and most of our roles will have this level of, I call AI enabled skills, which is going to be our ability to implement these tools. And there is this combination of these skills that are going to come together. Some of them are brand new, right? Like prompt engineering. That's a brand new thing that we didn't know about before, but it's very much kind of like going back to COVID, contact tracer, that role. Nobody knew what that was before COVID happened, contact tracer.
Right.
And April 2020, contact tracer, there were 100,000 jobs available in the US at $17 an hour for a brand new job role that never existed before, within 2 months of COVID kind of breaking out, right? So I
Right.
want you to think about that.
That's major. What I really like that with the on the AI side, I feel like it's always been that way in a way, and I'll explain in a second. So I feel like there's leaders that have been, it would almost be now if you said, oh, that guy's just really old school or that girl's really old school, meaning they're kind of stuck in their ways, maybe is the implication, right? They're not open to learning. And I think in the past, it might have been like they're afraid of tech, right? Like, they don't want to put their forms into Salesforce. They'll do their own thing, but they can still sell. So we're going to put up with it or whatever. And this is now an expansion of that, right? It's like you're going to get beaten badly if
Yeah,
you
but not
can't
by a
leverage.
human, not by a
Exactly.
human.
Exactly.
That's the
Because you
difference,
can't,
right?
right? Because you can't manually keep up with your competition when they're leveraging all this stuff that's out there. And so I feel like for leaders to be relevant, and I feel like it's always been this way, is you've got to be learning and growing. It was funny. You talked about earlier wearing your degrees a little bit like I forgot the word that you said. Was it like trophies,
Yeah,
or am I making
trophies.
that up?
Yeah, yeah. Hold on,
Okay.
hold on. I had to see a therapist for a whole year for her to tell me that. She was like, "You were wearing them like trophies."
Well, maybe a little bit, but I think even in the less than an hour that we've got to talk, you seem like a person that is passionately curious. Like if someone said like, "What's your superpower?" I'm guessing it's like you're always growing, you're always learning.
Yeah.
The difference might have been like you didn't maybe even know why you were studying the subjects you were studying versus now it's like you're still going to go get the equivalent of 5 more degrees. It's just going to be in stuff that you actually care about and that you want to learn, right? And that you're going to implement. So I think it was satisfying, probably a desire of yours to like take in information and expand your brain, right? It was just like,
You're absolutely
yeah.
correct. You're absolutely correct. If I look back, as you said that to me, I kind of chuckled. I was that, young woman that every year of college I was in a different country studying, and I figured out how to rig the system to transfer the credits.
Right.
So I still graduated. I went to law school and I was 18, right? So that's how come I graduated. I finished high school at 15, all of them in different countries and
It's
different parts of the
crazy.
world. So you are correct. If I really think about it, I was curious about culture, curious about people, curious about learning, and I figured out how to rig the system to have it work in my favor, that I could still come out with that piece of paper and make the parents happy.
Yeah, well, because you don't, which is awesome. I mean, that's a really cool skill set. But at the same time, it's like you don't go from okay, I'm the person with all these degrees, and I'm a lawyer at 21, and then okay, wait a minute, my passion or the thing that lights me up is really going to be more on the people side. But then going, wait a minute, technology is now a way where I can leverage that, right? And instead of helping a handful of people, maybe I can help thousands or tens of thousands or whatever it is. And so it's that combination of all of it that is probably, leading
Yeah.
to what I guess I'm going to ask you next, which is where does all this come together for you? Like, I guess it's kind of a heavy question, but what's it all about for you? Like, what's the impact that you're ultimately trying to have?
I deeply, deeply care about inclusion. And I
Mm.
do believe that the greatest equalizer is actually not education, it's our human skills. And I think every single one of us arrived in this world, whether we had opportunities or not, whether we're the right skin color, we're from the right countries, we're from whatever it is, we have these really unique, incredible combinations of things that make us us. And
Hmm.
so many times it's squashed by the world. And if I can, through Glee, allow, that kid in Bangladesh or in the US somewhere that doesn't have the opportunity to see what an international global mindset, and as they're learning on Glee, they get to see how, oh, this is how a French person would handle this situation, or someone in Bangladesh would handle this situation, and be able to start seeing each other in this context.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the world. And then I give you access to, I give you the ability to access all of these industry experts. So these 500 plus, and, I had from the head of AI of NVIDIA to Nobel Peace Prize winners. I mean, we have the absolute cream of the crop around the world of thinkers and doers who support Glee, because we power UNICEF, the YOMA platform. So,
Mm.
he has very high profile, the UAE government as clients, high paying clients. And then we do the bottom of the pyramid, right? We do, as I said, Yoma, the Jayo platform, tier 3 cities across India. That's the AT&T of the US. So I think that is the impact of the work, where the SEO, if I talk in marketing terms, is not going to be your degrees, and the SEO is not going to be the stuff. It's going to actually be, oh, wow, look at that unique combination of things that make, Sallyann, her, that little thing with that little bit of courage and look how she applies it in situations, and let me include her in the room, just like the Careem founders did of me,
And
right?
this all
Because
comes from you were feeling isolated as a kid, I'm guessing, right? From what I can
absolutely,
tell. Yeah.
it's deeply, deeply, I think, aligned with the things that people gave me value or invited me at the table were not actually the things that are my true strength and makes me uniquely me. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I ended up building a product that allows that to surface. Not only in many ways, maybe I'm addressing it in myself, but also addressing it. What a beautiful way to address, and as I'm passing through in this world, to leave that to the
Of
world.
course. I mean, because it just opens it up to everybody that you touch, which is super cool. Yeah, I love that. So how do people that are listening to this, what's your message to them? I mean, are you somebody that works, is there a way for them to work on what we're talking about on even a small scale? Like, let's say someone's a business owner like I am with, 20 employees. How do
Absolutely.
they engage in kind of this conversation?
Absolutely. So, whether it is you are, so the first thing I would say to everyone, is, I would say shamelessly go check Gleek out,
Yeah.
Gleek right? And in terms of, your own organization, small or big, today there are so many tools. There are so many things, and I often start with a really simple thing. How do I not have my people leave the best selves of themselves at the door as they walk into the office? And, sometimes it's just asking that simple question, right? And I often ask it for when my new joiners come in. I said, whatever the role is you came in on, I said the first 3 to 6 months is me actually figuring out, because most people don't know. They don't know, Ken. They don't
Mm-hmm.
know. And even with the older ones, they just don't know, many
Right.
people, what is it that is their area of flow. And I spend the time trying to figure that out. Sometimes it takes a little more time than others, but the minute you figure that out, then you no longer have to manage people. You are able to truly then lead, because
Mm.
people then naturally, you only have to manage people when they are not in their flow. And
Mm-hmm.
right, that's when you have to manage, and you get the tighter, the more that they're not there and you're trying them to get to do things that they're not really wanting to do, have the ability, the more you have to manage. I
Right.
hate managing, absolutely hate managing. I want to lead. I don't want to manage. And I think that's the big difference for many of you, is when you think about your day, small or big, and you go, am I managing people all day, or am I truly leading? And it
Right.
will give you a hint of whether your people are truly in the areas of what they should be doing and what they should not be doing.
Yeah, we ask simple questions like, when did you feel aligned and kind of on fire this week, right? And we do this in a consistent way using some online software. And when didn't you? Like, when was work a drag? When was it not
Yeah,
fun? And if someone's consistently saying, work wasn't fun for a good percentage, I mean, we all have to do stuff we don't always love to do, right? I mean,
absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
yeah, when that's way out of balance, I mean, to your point, I also cannot stand the word man. A manager to me is like an administrator. A manager to me is all about rules and compliance, and it's a non-elevated, I guess, leadership position,
Absolutely.
and it's not inspiring. And leadership is about, yeah, I mean, I think creating environments that allow others to excel. I think handing them the Gatorade while they're on the marathon, kind of, and being supportive and getting them there. So I love what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And likewise, I love that you asked that question of your team. It's actually one of the questions of when someone is disengaged and in a funk. We actually have a micro practice on this, what is the best way to handle it? And it's so interesting, right? Most of the, manager type, they will keep going, they will go through the KPI and go through all the different things that you should be doing. And it's just one simple question. Can you pinpoint a time in your life where you felt really good? It doesn't have to be within the company. And what were you doing at that time? And why were you feeling that way? And if you can then take that and connect it, what looks like that within
Yep.
the company, within this role? Or maybe it might be within another role. I can't tell you how many people start off, senior people, right? Who are at C-suite in other companies and
Right.
organization, and they come to Glee and they realize that they're not in terms of that C-suite role, and they're like, no, I actually am here. And somehow you get them to there, and you can see them exhale, literally
Right.
exhale.
Right.
uh,
Because it's like pretending you're something you're not for a long period of time, right? Like, oh, I'm supposed to be the marketing guy, or I'm supposed to be this or that, right? And I have to act a certain way. And it's like, and then you get trapped a little bit because if you found a way to kind of fake it, I guess, then pay has
you
gotten
know,
better, your title has gotten better, and it's a little hard to pivot out of those situations, right?
and my life, but in my 20s,
Yeah.
right? So I laugh now. I'm like, I'm the poorest I've ever been as a startup founder. I was like, I walked
Right.
away. I can't even tell you in terms of my C-suite paychecks. And I said, but
Sure.
you know what? Every day I wake up with one foot in fear, one in courage. There is absolutely no regret
Mhm.
because I am in absolute flow,
Yes.
uh, where who you are and what you do is so aligned. So work is no longer work.
Hmm. I love that. You also had I would say the gift of actually figuring out that you were out of alignment in your 20s, because I think a lot
Yeah,
of people never figure that out,
absolutely.
or figure it out really late, or all of a sudden they get the gold watch from their 30-year corporate job, and, their identity's gone, and, they feel like they
Uh,
wasted their life, right? So, I mean, I think it's cool
yeah,
to see it that early.
Yeah, and Ken, I want to say that we're at an interesting time in history, for your listeners, where I think the most vulnerable age group right now are people between 45 and 60, because it's the first time in history, many people do not know this, where that age group outnumbers under 5 years old.
Hmm.
Um, and it's the first time in history where there is so many new emerging areas. So think about green skills, Web3, data, AI, where people who have had solid careers, even as CEOs of publicly traded companies, right, for in the last 20 or 30 years, and they find themselves today exactly where the 20-year-old is, going, wait a minute, I need to learn all of these things from scratch and start from scratch because I am now living until I'm 80 or 90 and start over. So
Right.
it's a really interesting time, I think, for that particular age group, where I have found who have gotten to the top of the ladder, and they're now going, okay, now what? I
Right.
don't know anything about these areas. So I want to call it the time of opportunity for those of us, who are
Well,
getting a
I
little
think
bit
it
of
can either
fear.
be really inspiring or really scary, and I've felt both emotions around that subject. Because do you know who Peter Diamandis is?
Is he the university, Singularity University?
I think he might be. He's like a
I
futurist
think,
kind of guy,
yeah, the
and
futurist
yes,
guy,
yeah,
Singularity University. Yeah.
yes. Okay, so I heard him speaking at a seminar, and he said this is a few years back, and he said somebody, or no, he said people in this room that are, it was like, how many people in this room are around 20 years old? I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said, but he said
Sure.
there are 20 years people that are 20 in this room that will live to 120, and, people that are 50 in this room that will easily live to 110. And
Yeah.
I wasn't doing well at the time, right? Like, I had left my corporate job and I was trying to reestablish my identity. I had just started my previous recruiting company. It wasn't going that well, and I wasn't that inspired. And I think when you're in that mode, I'm thinking the finish line is a certain period of time off. And I'm not talking necessarily about death, but maybe work.
Absolutely.
And he
Absolutely.
all of a sudden, again, that could be awesome because he gives you this new lease on life that, like, guess what, buddy? You're not even like technically middle aged yet. But that was also kind of an oh shit moment because it was like,
Absolutely.
what? Like, I'm not. And so I think we're also in an era that not only are we going to live longer, but we're also in an area where age and seniority, to your point, I mean, I don't think it has like really any bearing, at least in America. And I think what does is value. And I
Mhm.
think in a free economy, I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, if you're 21 years old and you can bring it to the table, or you're the new Mark Zuckerberg, then congrats. You can be the new Mark Zuckerberg. And if you're 50 and you were the chief financial officer for some company that's now defunct and you haven't been working on yourself and you were just kind of tucked in there because you knew the owner or whatever, you might be screwed. And I think that's okay. Like, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that's fair, you know?
I absolutely, absolutely agree with you. But I think the thing that has changed fundamentally is that, in our parents and our grandparents' generation, when they came out of college and took a job, that degree had a value of
Yes.
30-year, trajectory at a job and, going upwards within that job. Today, I think for young people, they graduate and they're lucky if the degree is even relevant by the
Right.
time they graduate. And for the 30-year-old, I would say maybe 45 and above. So the pre-millennials, I would say, in that particular age group, um, you know, it's expired, the value of their degrees now, right? With all of the new emerging technologies, and there's this whole new wave. And this is where learning agility
Mm.
comes in and redefining, because it's not even learning agility within your sector. I mean, think about people in traditional oil and gas. The sector has completely changed now into green technologies, right? Think
Mm-hmm.
about people in traditional banking. The sector
Mm.
is completely going to shift.
Right.
Already has started shifting in terms of fintech, blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
Think about traditional salespeople. The sector is about to go through this massive transformation with this whole Web3.
Right.
There is this massive shift and change that's happening to this particular group that has had fully blossomed careers,
Mm-hmm.
20, 25 years at the senior level, at very fat, going, wait a minute, I am now with the 20-year-old competing for the exact same job in whatever. And you know what? I've been rusty in terms of my learning
Right.
agility.
What I'd say, here's the silver lining for all my fellow Gen Xers is, and I'm saying that loosely because I might be on the side of the next generation, but um, you do have the experience, hopefully, if you're in a leadership role, of leadership, right? You've had the experience.
Absolutely.
However, that without the technical ability, it's going to be a problem for you. But if you get the technical ability, now you're back on top, right? So I think it's,
Absolutely.
yeah, we just
Absolutely.
have to be like you. We have to we got to be passionately curious. We got to be constantly looking at these things, and because again, that banker who once had a degree from, I don't know, best, Harvard, but doesn't know anything about blockchain or fintech, now is screwed to the one that graduated from Sacramento State or didn't graduate at all and does, right?
So who could have just taken some Coursera course on
Yeah,
blockchain technologies and some
totally,
IBM something on it, right? I mean,
totally.
think about that. One of the projects I'm really excited about, we have COP28 happening in Dubai at the end of the year. That's like the big green. And we're running for the first time ever an incubator and accelerator to green skill 50-year-olds and above. And people were like, why? And I said, because they have all the human skills
Mm,
that are needed. I said, they are well groomed, that age group. And what we complain about, I said, but they don't have the actual hard skills.
right,
So if I could give them the vocabulary to be able to, I said, it's the number one job right now with open roles across the world. It will continue to be for the next couple of years. We do not have people to fill those jobs. And we have this huge group of incredibly capable and competent in terms of the human skills that are needed around this. We just need
right.
to get very quickly in terms of the hard skills.
Well, and what's
So
interesting is human skills. and you're the expert in it, so you tell me if I'm wrong, but I would say from my vantage point, human skills can be groomed, but not necessarily. I mean, there's sometimes I just look at somebody and try to work with them, but I'm like, there's parts of their human skill set that I can't just bring to the table for them, or that they
Yeah.
can't necessarily learn, right? There's certain people who are not going to be in leadership roles. There's certain people who their communication can be improved, but it's just not going to be where it needs to be. But we can all, if we're open-minded to it enough, learn the hard skills. And so I think for
Yeah.
the Gen Xers or the people in that 45 to 60 range that you're talking about, it's like the hard part is done. The life experience, the people, if you have it.
Yeah.
Now go open your eyes and be okay with being the kid in the classroom again and having your hand up and doing homework again.
Yeah, be cool with metaverse.
Exactly. I'm not quite down with the metaverse yet, but
Can I tell
we'll
you
see.
something, Ken? The
Yeah.
fact that I dropped, last quarter, I dropped an NFT, I'm talking
I
like,
saw that.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I dropped an NFT of industry experts' time. So 5 hours of time that, is you could buy an NFT, which means, it would be on blockchain. And the reason I did it on blockchain is those conversations with these experts, a lot of times when you're speaking with experts, there's a lot of patents and a lot of innovation happening. And we were capturing it for them on blockchain so it can be coned.
Oh,
By
cool.
but I have to give you the funniest part, right? Like, so we had like the world's best experts, like, the head of innovation of Siemens,
Yeah.
Dr. Patrick Hussein, data science, Bell Labs, 400 patents, you name it, right? And they're all in their 60s.
Right.
And and people were like, how did you get them to be NFTs on your platform? And I said, they just thought it was the coolest thing. They can go tell their grandkids.
Totally. And you just set it up and made it easy for them, right? They were like, it's almost like, I don't know what a podcast is, but I can talk to you in this microphone if someone turns it on, right? So that's amazing.
Awesome. It was just absolutely awesome that, something as simple as giving your wisdom and time, we use that as the bridge of introducing, the world's smartest people, right? They're leading the largest companies in the world, doing
Right.
the most important things. We introduce them just with their time and talking to people. They enjoy doing that.
Of course.
And we tokenize that. And we introduce them to blockchain. We introduce them to NFTs. Now we just introduced MentorGPT, which is all of the situations that they answered. We built a GPT around that. Now they're so excited to tell everybody that, they are AI themselves.
So MentorGPT, which I know you just launched, I think like last month, right?
Yes, we just launched like 2 weeks ago. We hard launched in September, but it's available now in a soft launch.
So I know we're coming up on time, but can you give me an overview of that or give us?
Absolutely. So really simple, Glee, the thing that sets Glee apart from any other learning platform out there is that as you learn, you get to see how 5 industry experts handle the exact situation, right? So, and you then can tap on those experts and have live sessions with them. MentorGPT, what it does is as you're learning, we allow you to access ChatGPT and what we call sheep thinking, see how everybody else, because ChatGPT is really that 80% of normative thinking, but then also see how the experts, which is the MentorGPT, who has context, who has wisdom, who has human skills, how they line up against ChatGPT on answering those questions.
I can't wait to check it out. I love it. I love the idea of this.
Very cool. It's very, very cool. So, really excited about that.
I'm a fan of feedback. I'm one of the nerds that was like, couldn't wait for my performance review. Like as long as I, respected the opinion of the person giving it, I always want that,
Same with me. Same. I'm always tinkering, always looking for feedback. That's why, as I said to you, it's like soft launch. People were like, no, it's a hard launch. I'm like, no, we got to get feedback.
Right.
Let thousands of people pound on it, tell me everything that's wrong with it. And then I'll be like, okay, it's a hard launch now.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been amazing talking with you. Thanks for everything that you're doing, and love the impact that you're having too.
Thank you so much, Ken, for having me, and likewise to your audience.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.